Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. This is the special Tesla Roadster podcast that we do every week at 11 o'clock. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. Good morning. Looks like we have a Tesla Roadster in Greece.
Precisely. What I asked for was, couldn't quite come up with a theme, so I said, you know what? These cars are pretty cool looking. And then I just happened to see on my screen something pop up about Santorini in Greece.
Ah, okay.
It's where all the white buildings are on the Mediterranean coastline, you know, up on the hills.
Oh, yes.
Very famous tourist spot. And I thought, what would a chrome-wrapped Roadster with a lot of reflection in it look like in this setting because of all of its bright colors and detail? And anyway, this is what it came up with. Yeah, it's there's a little narrow street there behind Mark, and it's inspiring to me. I mean, wouldn't it be nice to go there with your yacht, have your Roadster on the yacht, park the yacht, and then drive your car around Santorini? Be beautiful.
And that is as accurate as I have seen a Tesla Roadster get generated yet.
It's not bad, yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, the headlights, you see the two little eyes in each one, and that's a little different, but still fairly accurate.
Pretty close.
There's almost a charge port door right by the your sunglasses there.
Right about there. Right about there.
So we usually pop up AI images. We're definitely into AI, and this is just one of our backgrounds. So we've got a couple of questions here to start with, and then we can get right into the show. Instagram, Rashid Gadou1 says, hello from Morocco. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
And then YouTube, Bill Manello says, hey, that looks like Greece. It is. It's Santorini, Greece. So one of the things I wanted to start with was we have, of course, the free Tesla Roadster matchmaking site, which is becoming more and more popular, and we're providing a great service. Cars are getting sold, and they're getting sold for a lot more than what some of these auctions are doing.
Yes.
It's a gentle sale. There's no deadline. It's the listing is live until it's sold. And if someone feels that their car isn't moving quickly enough, they have the option to lower the price, and they oftentimes do. And then we rebroadcast. And what I mean by that is we have a deal with the Roadster owners that will send their cars, or that will list their cars with us, that we have pre-qualified Roadster buyers. And these are people that we've collected over the years now. Anybody that expresses an interest in a Roadster, we talk to them, we ask, what are you looking for? And then we ask them, do you want to join the pre-qualified buyer list?
Right.
We do some vetting, we find out that they're real, and these are usually friends in the community, people that we know, customers, even vendors, for example. All over the world. It's not just in the U.S. And we have accumulated now 441 of those. So there are quite a few pre-qualified buyers that we send that list to. Whenever a car comes up for sale, the advantage of being a pre-qualified buyer is that you get notified 24 hours in advance of any social media posting. And what we find is oftentimes the cars will sell before they even go to social media promotion.
Yes.
So there's an advantage to being a pre-qualified buyer. Any of you, by the way, that want to be on that list, send us an email at ev@gruber.com and tell us what you're looking for, why you're interested, and we'll put you on that list.
Yeah, there's no cost to join the list, and it's a very, no obligation to it. And it's not like you're going to get spammed 2 or 3 times a week. It's when we have a Roadster to post, you'll get an email that says, hey, we've got a new Roadster.
And for the very few times that someone says, oh, I've got my Roadster now, I don't want to see anymore, we'll take you off. And I think that's happened twice in the last 2 years or something. Yeah. Most people like to continue to see what kind of Roadsters are coming up available for sale. So we got one here, for example. He says, I'm interested in the car that's listed for $87,500. And is it Los Angeles or Phoenix? Turns out this one is in Phoenix. And what we do then is for fixed price listings, interested buyers reach out to us, and we then supply seller information, allowing them to negotiate directly with the seller. In other words, we're out of the picture.
Yeah,
we're out of the equation.
Our role is pretty much done at that point.
Yes. Yep.
Unless they come back to us later and say, okay, now we need somebody to facilitate the exchange of the title and the money. And we do provide that escrow service also for free.
And another popular benefit is tech support. Some of these people have never owned a Roadster. Then they ask us, how do I charge it? What do I need to install in my house? How am I going to get that done? How much does it cost? What comes with the Roadster? What should I be concerned about? What should I look for? What is the deferred maintenance? These are all free services that we offer to the prospective buyers. Now, there's another type of sale that we do on the Roadster matchmaking site. There's fixed cost, where the customer decides on a price that they can change at any point in time. Then there are bids only. And the bids are then accepted by us. We collect them and we pass them on to the buyer. To the seller. And they then are responsible for final vetting. In other words, is this a real bid? Who is this person? And deciding when to close the auction. With the Chinese Roadsters, the sellers came to us early last year and said, we came across Roadsters in sea containers. A friend of ours there at the dock in Guangdong, China, became aware of them, knew that we sometimes buy odd things, and we now have these 3 available. What should we do? And we understand that you have a Roadster matchmaking site, that you have a large global reach, and we would like to list these cars with you or find out how to. And of course, they always ask, how much does it cost? Well, it doesn't cost anything.
Right.
It's free. We don't charge for anything. And as I thought about this program that we're in now, there was only one time that a form of payment was made. I typically always refuse any form of payment. Well, we'd like to pay you. You need to get paid something for this involvement.
Right.
And I say, it's free. Don't worry about it. We're okay. Well, this particular buyer eventually gave me an expensive bottle of scotch, which, by the way, I just finished. It took me almost 2 years. Yeah. I'm not recommending that anyone gives us gifts, but, it's hard to turn down a good bottle of scotch.
Well,
right?
yeah, especially this was very much a top-line bottle of scotch, too.
Yes, yeah, that too. And it took me a year and a half to drink it, I think, show you what kind of drinking habits I have. So anyway, the bottom line is we are a broker. Now, with the Chinese Roadsters, the sellers were in Jordan, in Dubai, in China. And sometimes the bids would come in, and we kind of broke that rule where we began to vet some of these to make sure that they were real before we passed them on. So there were some cases where the bidders would come in and we would begin to communicate with them, which is not the norm. The bids typically go directly to the seller, and we're out of the equation.
Yeah, and I think both for the amounts that some of these bids were coming in at, and the fact that our sellers were largely indisposed. They were not in a position where they were able to try to vet these buyers. We went ahead and did some of that.
Mm-hmm. Now, we also advised the sellers. Initially, the Chinese Roadsters were going to go to Dubai because there's a free trade zone, and it's much easier to gain access to the dock to see the cars. The concern, however, was in this free trade zone, there was very little, if any, security. And they were definitely concerned about the integrity of the Roadsters being there. But that was the plan for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
Then we passed on a bidder that was in Russia, and that was percolating for a while. Again, the sellers now are communicating directly with the bidder, not us,
right,
updating us. Well, then that deal didn't quite go through. And we continued to collect bids until we got around the $800,000 area. And again, these were people that we generally knew of, or that we knew were in the community. They were real bidders.
Yes.
And then out of the clear blue, a $2 million bid shows up. Well, initially we thought, well, it's a scam. It's not real. It's a jokester.
Exactly.
It's, all of that, right? So again, the sellers some were traveling, and I decided, well, let me call this gentleman and find out. All right. It was a real potential buyer. What they were doing was starting a leasing company in Canada, a exotic car leasing company. Mm-hmm. They had serious funding for this project, and they decided that in order to launch their company, these 3 Chinese Roadsters now had been promoted so much by us that they had global visibility. How many global magazines did we have that asked for interviews and the storylines and all that?
I think it was 28 or 29 published stories that we ended up seeing globally.
Right.
Some of these were people who talked to us directly, and some of these were stories of stories.
Right.
You know, we would get Electrek or I'm trying to remember some of the other EV publications here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would look up online and we'd find out that somebody in Australia had published the story from Electrek that had talked to us.
Regurgitated the story, basically, and then eventually sought us out and said, can you add some flavor to this and some light to this?
Yeah, we had several of those as well, where people had said, we read about this in Inside EVs, or we were learning, we've seen this published, but the information is a week and a half old, or do you have any new information for us? What can you tell us about this? So we would disclose it. We would talk about them.
And then there were podcasts that invited us to speak about the cars.
Yes.
We were either on Zoom calls or, in some way on their live podcasts. There were some voice-only podcasts I remember that we did. And Stern magazine in Germany, for example, that went on for a few days where they gathered information and then they interviewed and used, excerpts of the phone interview or the live interview. It was a massive promotion, and we had no idea that 3 barn find cars would generate this kind of global visibility. Just to give you an idea of how much there was, we had a truck driver show up one day unloading. We have big semis that come in and load and unload here at the Gruber companies. And he asked the warehouse workers, so what's the story on those 3 Roadsters that you guys are selling?
Yeah.
It was widespread and enormous visibility. So that basically set the stage for how involved we were in this. And this $2 million bidder, by the way, the first question I asked them, I said, why would you take 3 highly collectible cars that have never even been titled, that are going to need some work, and put them on the road? The value in these cars is in their 0 or close to 0 mile status and the fact that they have never been driven or titled. And then he explained, of course, the fact that they were going to use these as showpieces to help launch their leasing company, exotic car leasing company.
Sure. They had seen the marketing that had gone on. I remember this was getting big when I saw one of the EV articles appear on the front page of the MSN news website. I thought, whoa, this has really gotten some legs. And and I think I even talked to you about that shortly after it happened. And so these guys were trying to capitalize on the tens of thousands of dollars of value in marketing that had taken place when these became known worldwide.
And then the final question I asked them was a fair question. I said, look, the highest bid is $800K. Why don't you go incrementally above that, which might be sufficient?
Yeah.
And they said, no, we have the funding. We want to make sure that we get these cars, and $2 million is a fair bid, we feel, for these cars, so we're going to stick with that.
Yes.
The degree of vetting that I did was there was a website involved, and I checked out their website. The sellers also talked to them, and they checked them out. So we now have a number of bidders, and of course, one of them blew away the rest of the guys.
Yeah.
All right. Now, eventually, we talked the sellers into the fact that some bidders are hesitant, because we were contacted by a number of potential bidders that felt uncomfortable bidding on something sight unseen. These are in sea containers in Guangdong, China. How do we know they're real? How do we know they're intact? How do we know anything about these cars? So we talked to the sellers, and we communicated all of this hesitancy, and they said, well, we're going to bring them to the U.S. eventually anyway, so why don't we just do that? I then suggested, well, they need to be dispositioned. And in order to provide the next level of certification for these cars, you're going to need a highly credible organization like Tesla or like us to certify these cars. go into the log files, go into the firmware, go into the electronics, and corroborate what we believe to be low mileage undriven roadsters and give a complete disposition.
Right.
So that ended up eventually becoming the plan. They were moved from 40-foot sea containers in the 20s, and then they were shipped to the United States. There were lots of delays. The craziness in Eastern Europe was going on at the time, and
Right.
you know, there were delays. Finally, the cars arrived, and we were able to do a complete disposition on the cars. I've got a picture here, Jesse, that we can throw up, and it is, let's see here, I'll give you the exact name, the borescope picture. When we first opened up the sea containers, the 20-foot sea containers, it was pretty clear that these were in a very unfriendly environment. What I mean by that is there were insects, roaches that began to scurry. And they were on the cars. One went up one of the guys' pants, and he hollered and scooted out of there pretty rapidly. But there were bugs everywhere, and they were, you know, pretty nasty bugs. So we kind of suspected that these were definitely not in a controlled environment.
Yes.
We then began to assess the cars and realized that there was rodent damage, and sometimes major. So here what we have is one of our technicians with a borescope looking at inside the running board, and the next picture, Jesse, borescope 2, reveals what was pretty evident. There was a strong odor, a smell,
Yes.
organic matter decomposing, and with the next picture you'll be able to see that there was nibbling and chewing and wiring harnesses on the doors that were chewed through. There were definitely inhabitants in these cars that were taking up residence in the cars.
If I remember right, we had, no, these came in this last summer, and in the spring we had seen our first Roadster that had significant rodent damage as a result of being stored. So we suspected that something like this might happen. They'd been sitting in sea containers on a shipping dock for 13 years. Or that was the story that we had been told. And so this wasn't a terrible surprise for us when we got the cars in and had that somewhat distinctive that urine and feces smell come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was definitely some odors associated. We got a couple of questions here. Let's entertain those and then we'll go on.
Yes.
EV Stop says, when a Tesla high voltage battery has a bad cell, do you replace it or isolate it? We simply snip it out of circuit. And in a Tesla Roadster, it only takes one cell out of 6,831 to disable the car. He says, what's the advantage and disadvantage of each? Well, in a Tesla Roadster, there is a sheet which has two clamshells and thermal potting compound, which is like an epoxy.
Right.
And in order to remove a cell, it's destructive. You have to remove bonding plates, you have to remove fusible links, then you have to have an ultrasonic welder to put that back together. And you then have to take that cell out by drilling it out, chipping it out, and there's a cooling jacket that could be compromised. When all it takes is disabling one cell, and the car never realizes that 1 out of 7,000 cells went MIA. And the way to disable it is a fusible link wire is simply snipped. So that's the advantage and disadvantage.
Yeah, that's definitely the advantage of just taking a cell and isolating it, taking it out of circuit. It's so much simpler than the process that EV Clinic has followed to replace cells. I guess the advantage of replacing cell is that if you find that you have a brick that has too many bad cells, that you'll run into a limit on how many you can take out of circuit. If you're replacing cells with other cells that have a similar CAC value, you're not going to run into that limit because you'll be able to just replace cells.
And there's another factor, which is a Jason Hughes philosophy, which some of these shops subscribe to, that these cells have to be replaced. We have just simply not found that to be the case.
Right.
So you have two different philosophies, and EV Clinic definitely has a procedure where they replace cells.
Yeah, and it's an impressive procedure overall that we've seen the video of how they do it. I think the Tesla engineers have recommended that you take no more than 4 cells or something like that out of series.
per brick, which is a collection of 69 cells in a Tesla Roadster.
Yeah, I know that we have done internal testing and have taken far more than 4 cells out of series with no negative adverse effects. Although that's not what we follow. When we're doing stuff for customers, we only, if I remember right, we keep that limit to the 4 cells.
Yeah. Actually, 1 is typically what happens.
Yeah.
You know, and we have spare sheets that we can replace if it gets too far down the road. Evie Stop also asks, he says, I see Dan O'Dowd, the Dawn guy that did the full Super Bowl ad, full self-driving Super Bowl ad, bought all of those Roadsters. That is correct. And,
that is true.
We were unable to say any of this until it was released on a video, and we'll get into that. Hang in there, guys, because we're going to talk a lot more about that.
Yes.
TikTok, funny Alex, LOL. He says, y'all hiring? Yes, we just hired someone else yesterday, actually. Evie at Gruber.com for those of you applying. So we've got the borescope. Did we show the borescope picture with the number 2?
Yes, we've showed that one.
All right. Then we... let's get the skid plate residue, just to give you an idea of what kind of carnage we found in these cars. What we're about to show here is basically a skid plate that goes underneath the car. And when you unbolt that, it gives you access to all the suspension components underneath the car. Well, here you can see one of the Chinese Roadsters, the amount of feces, debris, discharge, even plastic bags, for example. They must have gone shopping and, just dropped the bags, is what I'm thinking. But this is what we found, a variety of residue, including seeds and anything that rodents may have collected over 13 years.
Yeah, so just to clarify for everybody watching, this is not the underside of that skid plate that would be visible or open to the world. This is the top side of that skid plate.
Yes.
That is not visible, and it's able to collect all of that.
Right. Good point. Yes. And then the final thing is, if you go to picture Flaking PPF, what we found that on all 3 of these Roadsters, they had applied paint protective film at the factory. And PPF needs to be replaced every 7 to 8 years in a normal environment.
Mm-hmm.
In these sea containers, we theorized that there were temperature extremes. At night, possibly even to freezing. During the day, baking in these steel containers, especially during the summer, would just elevate the temperatures. And the PPF simply did not respond well to this kind of these types of thermal events. So what we ended up doing is, and a lot of consultation with the sellers, because we had decisions to make. Is it possible that a potential buyer is going to be interested in having these completely untouched, in other words, reeking like a French outhouse,
right,
or some remediation, including sanitizing, cleaning, getting the roaches and the bugs out of there, which, by the way, would have been a tragedy for us because we store all our Tesla Roadsters inside. And these things were hibernation places for a whole bunch of critters that we didn't want inhabiting other cars in our facility. So the PPF was flaking. And you can see on that front spoiler there, that front lip, how there are loose pieces of cellophane, basically the top layer of the PPF. That's what we pressure washed off the cars. Revealing underneath it was the adhesive, which had gotten rock hard. It's called crystallizing, bonding with a clear coat, which now the only remediation is repainting, sanding it off and repainting because it's hard. Someone pointed out on one of the other Facebook sites, well, didn't they know that steam is the way to take off PPF? Well, yes, heat works quite well. We take PPF off all the time. We use heat guns, by the way.
Yes.
And if the adhesive is still somewhat pliable, then yes, heat is the correct way to do it. When, however, it hardens and crystallizes and bonds with clear coat, no amount of steam, heat is going to remove that.
Right, and we did not pressure wash these cars until after consulting with some of our PPF experts and saying what will happen if we pressure wash this car and try to and see if, the theory, working theory was, if we put a pressure wash on the car, will it damage the paint?
Right.
Will it damage the underlying paint further? And the consensus from, I believe, multiple experts was, no, the worst that will happen is that the plastic that's already starting to flake off will continue to come off, and you'll be left with the residue adhesive.
We had a PPF vendor actually come out on site. They reviewed these Tesla Roadsters, and they made very specific recommendations regarding temporary remediation and long-term remediation. And the bottom line was, repaint is your only option if you want to restore it to a like-new condition.
Sure.
All right, so that's a story on the PPF. The next thing was how much we charged this customer. There was, again, an allegation on another Facebook site that we charged $23,000 for these 3 Roadsters without giving full disclosure as to what was included in that $23,000. Well, first of all, that's a complete fabrication. It wasn't $23,000. It was $14,405 for 3 cars. And we have all the invoices and the labor and the parts activity that entailed.
Yeah.
The other allegation was, well, we just overcharge, right? A real business does not overcharge. We are working in a competitive climate, and we provide fair value. Let me read you something. We are a business that tracks labor carefully. No arbitrary charges are applied or subjectivity in the process. And the correct skill is selected. In other words, if we've got somebody that's cleaning a car, it's not the same guy that's working in the engineering lab, our chief engineer, doing reverse engineering, charging, a lot more than the person that's cleaning the car. So we put the right resource and skill on the project. We do not, again, put lab engineers on pressure washing detail. The cleaning of these Roadsters included removing rodent feces, nests, requiring pressure washing both inside the cavities of the cars and removing the loose flaking PPF on the outside. Infinitely more than a normal car receipt.
In fact, if I recall correctly, the time that we billed for what would be called pressure washing was a fairly small fraction of this. About 20% of the bill was what would be called pressure washing. And actually, the pressure washing time was the time to disassemble the car, clean out all of the rodent waste, and reassemble everything. And then at the very end, finish it up with a pressure wash, or for those parts that need to be reassembled, pressure wash the individual parts before reassembling them.
Oh, there were multiple stages of sanitation, which also included an ozone generator being placed inside the cabins to get rid of the organic smells, the mold that was beginning to grow, and of course, cleaning the carpets and all of that.
Yeah, and all of that took place under that portion of the bill that was called, that included pressure washing.
Right.
I actually reviewed the bills just this morning to
You did? Okay.
to see what was there, and I saw pressure washing was actually a very small component of that $14,000.
There were 116 hours of labor in these cars, and the final invoice charge was $14,505 for all 3 cars for all of the work that was done. And by the way, the work wasn't just cleaning the cars. There was a 4th Tesla Roadster VIN 1185, which was in parts. The chassis was missing, the PEM, the battery. Those are the things that we think made it to the EV manufacturer for reverse engineering.
Correct.
They left fenders, they left the hard top, they left seats, they left everything else that was on the car in pieces, wrapped up in one of the sea containers. What we were hired to do was to take every single one of those items, unwrap them, get all of the insect nests out of there, and there were plenty. In fact, I remember every time we sat yet something else on a large counter that we had set up, started to unwrap, the roaches began scurrying.
Oh.
And we used air hoses to blow them outside, hoping, this was in summer, that the heat would eventually get to them. We were hoping that Chinese roaches weren't used to heat.
Yes, right? Yes.
The amount of time it took to process those hundreds of parts are included in that $14,000. So anyway, just to get you an idea, and that $14,000 in no way includes any of the months-long processing, promotion, answering questions, doing the interviews, and processing all of the social media activity related to the sale of these cars to promote them.
And lest we forget, the seller paid this money, not the buyers.
Well, to a point, what happened was, at the end, it was an $800,000 sale. And by the way, we'll get into that in a moment here. That remained confidential at the buyer's request until it was released on a video yesterday, and it's now public information.
Yeah, and it was released by, I don't know if it was the buyer or one of the buyer's agents.
It was Dan Markham did a video at Carl Medlock's shop.
Okay, so...
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to that, so we withheld all of that information until just now.
Right.
What were we talking about?
Well, we were talking about who was paying for the charges,
Who's
and
paying?
if I remember correctly, the seller did not receive the full $800,000.
Right. Okay. Why was it shorted? Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
the buyer ended up paying the bill, but the buyer shorted the seller the amount of the bill.
right. Exactly. So it was $786,000 or something was paid for the cars, with the expectation that the buyer of the 3 cars would then relieve our bill of $14,405.
Right. Which they did.
Which they did. Yes.
So that's why I say it was $800,000, but effectively the seller paid the bill for this, not the buyer.
Right. So somewhere along the way, while we were doing all of this promotion, before the cars even arrived, no, after the cars arrived, that's right.
The cars had arrived. We had done a lot of the promotion. It had gone viral. It had gone worldwide.
And there were now bidders that the seller was communicating with directly. We were no longer in the equation. Dan O'Dowd being one of them.
Yes.
There was a request made and a non-disclosure agreement that was sent to us to sign. And there were 7 provisions. I'm going to read you provision number 3. Removal of digital contents. The receiving party agrees to promptly remove and permanently delete all digital contents, including but not limited to photographs, videos, or any other related media depicting the aforementioned Tesla Roadsters. The 4th clause was no future posting. The receiving party shall refrain from making any future posts, public or private, or any platform or medium mentioning or referring to the aforementioned Tesla Roadsters.
Right. So the seller gave us this non-disclosure agreement, and we were close to closing the deal. At this point, I think the seller had decided that Dan O'Dowd, who had the high bid, was going to be the person he was going to negotiate with. The seller gave this non-disclosure agreement to us, and we went back to the seller and basically said, those 2 points we can't agree with, so we're not going to sign anything.
And here's why. We said, however, to promote these cars, we have saturated social media on numerous platforms. We even did a press release to 4,200 magazines. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
On numerous platforms ranging from multiple YouTube channels, Rumble, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Spotify, Reddit, Facebook videos and posts, numerous email blasts, interviews, and collaborations on others' YouTube channels, even videos on their channels, which would give us huge exposure in attempting to successfully remove content. We intentionally created a media circus to get your car sold.
Yes. Yes, and that was the main fact, that we said we can't agree to something that says we are solely responsible for removing all content related to these Roadsters. We can't do that because we don't control all content.
Right.
In fact, the content that we've put out there, as much as there is of that content, is a small fraction of the content that's out there worldwide now. I mean, I remember friends of the family living in rural Arkansas talking to us and saying, what do you guys know about these roadsters? Don't you work for a Gruber from Phoenix? Do you work for that same company, Mark?
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that's my company. And oh yeah, I know about these roadsters. You know, it reached everywhere.
Well, and to this day, the conversations eventually go back to the Chinese Roadsters. We are very closely linked to these cars, and to extract ourselves, we just found no way for that to be possible,
Yeah.
and we certainly didn't want to incriminate ourselves. It looks like Robert North is chiming in. If I may respectfully, if you have the money to own a Roadster, then you have the money to pay good people for great work, period. It's a very niche market. These cars, so good luck going anywhere else and what they would charge.
Robert has a good point there. You know, this is a collector car market, and Dan O'Dowd is known to be a very wealthy individual.
Well, there's another ingredient with what a shop charges for their services. And being a businessman, I know this intimately. We have salaries. We have people that we have to pay. And again, the guy that does the wiping down of the cars isn't getting paid anywhere near our chief engineer or the engineers in the lab that are doing reverse engineering. Mm-hmm. It's a simple process in business. You take cost, you put a markup on that to cover your overhead, and there's plenty of overhead in a business, and then that becomes what you charge for those services. And like you pointed out, this is not your average Ford and Chevy where you can get by with a low-tech mechanic. You actually have in these cars electronics, and you have a different cut of people that are skilled on reverse engineering, troubleshooting, creating test documentation, and repairing down to component level without schematics provided by the manufacturer.
And yet, looking at our shop rate, it's comparable to the shop rates of other ICE vehicle auto shops here in the Phoenix area.
It's actually lower than Tesla.
I'm not surprised.
And we do more than Tesla on the Tesla Roadster.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. You know, and like I say, even the ICE shops, the auto dealers that are here in town that service ICE vehicles and have the the more typical the renter are charging more for their hourly shop rate than what we have.
All right, we do have another image that we can pop up here, Jesse, and this one is under the images folder. And let's see here. Well, I guess I don't have that as a screenshot. All right, well, let me read it to you then. There's a post on Twitter this morning that we found, and it was from Dan O'Dowd. By the way,
I'll find it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Healthy respect for Dan O'Dowd. He is actually going to take these 3 cars, and instead of our leasing company that was going to put them on the road, the information that is being relayed now is that he's going to restore these. He's going to put them in a museum where they belong. And he's going to have Carl Medlock do the restoration. Carl does great paint and body. So this is a good fit.
Yeah, this is definitely a good fit. I've seen photos of the work that the Medlock and Son shop has done, and they appear to do good work, especially with the paint and body.
They are well known in the U.S., and so that was a good decision, and I'm very pleased that these Roadsters are going to get restored and that they're going to be available for view in an open setting to the public.
Yes.
Now, here's what Dan said in his Twitter post. He says, I am pleased to announce that I bought the 3 lost Tesla Roadsters that were found in shipping containers in China. I named them Brandy, Thandy, and Nandy to go with the original 2. He already has 2 Roadsters, Candy and Mandy. All right, so these cars look like they're getting some love. They're getting named. You know how when people personalize their cars? This is a good thing. All right. He then responded to a question from someone that said, are you going to feel awkward taking these to a Tesla service center? He then said, Tesla doesn't service Roadsters anymore. Well, Dan, that isn't true. If we bring up another picture, Jesse, and it's the picture of the Tesla service centers. And for those of you interested in where you can get a Tesla Roadster serviced, if you go to Facebook, Tesla Roadster Owners Group, there is at the very top of the page a listing of all of the Tesla Roadster service centers in the United States and globally that are willing to take Tesla Roadsters. And let me digress a bit here. It didn't make sense for any of the Tesla service centers around the world to accept Roadsters if they no longer had staff that was intimately familiar with the car.
Correct.
So they finally decided at some point which service centers have the talent and the skills, including corporate, by the way, where there is talent that flies around to the service centers. And they opted on a number of them. We asked Tesla, they promised us a list eventually, but in the meantime, on this Roadster Owners Group site, we asked the owners, tell us where you've had success. Tell us which service centers accepted your car and did a good job repairing it and even replaced your battery for you, the big ESS pack, the $45,000 replacement battery. Tempe, Arizona, Long Beach, California, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, Tampa, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Honolulu, Hawaii, Chicago, Illinois, Dayton, Ohio, Houston, Texas, Tysons Corner, Virginia. Globally, we've got Canada, Toronto, Oakville, Calgary, Asia, Hong Kong, Ap Lai Chau Service Center, Australia, Sydney, Australia, Europe, Oslo, Bærum, Norway, Frankfurt, Germany, Hillerød, Denmark, Leeds, UK, and Gatwick, UK. These are the service centers that are still allowing Roadster service or you to bring your Roadster there. Now, sometimes it's frustrating. We had one customer in the Northeast that was told, well, you got to drive 200 miles to take your Roadster.
Sure.
He complained a bit, and they said, look, we'll take care of the transport for you. They actually paid for the transport from his house to that service center 200 miles away.
Oh, nice.
So the bottom line is Tesla does still service Roadsters, and the reason we know that is we work with a number of the service centers. We provide log file support, tech support. We provide parts. There's collaboration. There's a synergy there, and we work together to get the customer's car back on the road. All right.
Now, Rob Wasney has a comment for us as well. He says, why paint a new car? Just sell them off while you can get top dollar.
Okay.
Well, you know, that's what our seller did, actually. They got them out of the, sea containers and got them here in the States and sold them off where they could get top dollar for them.
User 509 says, can I open a franchise of your store? You know, we're not in a position yet to franchise our operation. It is in the works, but there's nothing imminent right now. In the meantime, email us at evie@gruber.com, and we'll certainly keep you on a list in case that happens or when that happens.
Yeah, we do get those questions every so often. The biggest challenge has been, even here a few years later, we're largely still developing processes, and it's hard to franchise something where the processes are not fully developed yet.
Yeah. All right. So again, now getting back to, I don't know where those images went. I threw a bunch of images out there. Maybe I put them in the old folder, but here's an image that was posted on another Facebook site in response to our response to a request to delete our videos on these cars. The feasibility of that is virtually impossible because we don't control it all. And there are literally hundreds of them buried throughout TikTok and all of the social media platforms.
Right.
So the email, a response to a request a few days ago, we want you to delete all of your videos, was from Mark Schaffner. Mm-hmm. Pete reached out to me to get more information about a proposed confidentiality agreement sent to us November 11th, 2023, regarding the Chinese Roadsters. We did review that, we did not sign that, and we let the seller know that it's impossible for us to comply with Clause 3 and 4.
That's right.
So why would we sign that and, pose legal risk to ourselves? Instead, on November 13th, we replied with a different proposed agreement that we indicated we would be willing to sign.
Yes, correct.
And that was a different NDA that had some reality buried in it. The proposed agreement we sent to the seller is attached. We didn't hear anything back and did not pursue the matter further. So we have signed nothing at this point in time, but we did honor the verbal request that the buyer does not want his name revealed and he does not want the selling amount revealed, and we have kept true to that commitment.
Well, not only did we keep true to that commitment on the request that we got originally, where that had those 2 points that we just couldn't agree to, the other points on that request were like, yeah, we can probably do that. And we did make our best effort to hold to the conditions listed that we knew that verbally, that we said internally, yeah, those are probably doable. So keeping the seller anonymous, not disclosing the price, really kind of moving on with the attention that we had paid to the Tesla Roadsters even. We went ahead and did that because we felt that that was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So there you have it. The Tesla Roadsters are currently getting ready to be restored. Don't know yet where they will be placed once they're completed. And again, we're very pleased with Dan O'Dowd that he is restoring these and not just keeping them in some personal collection somewhere, but willing to share them in a museum with the public.
Yeah, that's kudos to you, Dan. We really appreciate hearing that that's going to happen. And I'm glad to hear that they're in a good spot to get the restoration done. I'm sure that by the time they're done, they're going to look like the brand new Roadsters that they really are.
All right, getting now into the world of artificial intelligence. I know we talk about that a lot because we have an AI podcast tomorrow that we do. But I was so pleased to hear yesterday that our techs over at Gruber Motor Company have really taken AI seriously. They are not only using it on a daily basis now. And what I mean by that is when you're sitting in a Roadster and you've got error codes popping up, yeah, we're talented. We know what a lot of those are, but you're going to run across some that you just simply won't know.
Right.
They use AI, and AI tells them, based on a number of large language model training sessions we've done with our personalized Roadster GPT, what that error is, what the solution is that we found. And the guys are not only using it, but they're feeding all the information they've collected into this Roadster GPT.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm so glad to hear that.
And of course, what that means is less repair time, quicker repair times, and all of that translates into savings for the customers.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, getting back to one other item that I didn't complete, when a business like ours charges, we have hourly rates, and we also have fixed rate. And it's quite common in the automotive industry. For example, all of our rebuild on a power electronics module is a flat rate. It doesn't matter how long it took that engineer or whether he had to take a detour because a component that he inserted didn't live up to expectations.
Right.
It's fixed rate. So we have both fixed rate, but for the unknown processes where all bets are off, we don't know what we're going to find, like the Chinese Roadsters.
Sure.
You find one nest, how many more are there? Well, you can't flat rate that and say, okay, nest removal is $238.
Right.
You're going to have to charge time and materials because it's a discovery process, and the customer ends up paying for the discovery process. All right. So getting back now to the AI, it is a benefit to the customers in that it shortens repair times. The next question that typically pops up, are we going to share it? How are we going to share it? We don't know yet. The OpenAI has actually developed a store for these kinds of applications. And down the road, we would like to think that we will have a subscription-based capability for this kind of knowledge.
Yeah, there's still a lot of questions about that store and subscription model that we have of OpenAI as well. You know, who is going to do editing in the knowledge base? who is going to be allowed to vet what comes in before it's edited? If anyone with a subscription is suddenly allowed to edit the information, and they continually feed in knowingly bad information, now are you going to corrupt your whole model?
Right.
And those are some of the types of questions that we don't have answers to yet, and it's just because it's such a new, a whole new process and new concept. Ultimately, I think we're going to go there. And that's because people will gravitate to do what's easy.
Right.
And we have given them a piece of software that is markedly easier and makes their job easier than what they were doing before.
Right.
Instead of somebody being frustrated, they had to spin his wheels for 2.5 hours trying to research some esoteric error he hadn't seen before. He can type in a natural language question to the AI, and it brings it up.
And let's not discount the fact that as AI continues to grow in intelligence, which is inevitable, at some point in time, it's going to be intelligent enough to sift the real information from the bogus information.
At some point it will.
By simply doing comparisons, for example. How many people have said that this is true versus, that one false bit of information?
Yes.
That's just an oversimplification of the process, but that's quite likely as well. All right, staying with Roadster theme, by the way, got a few tidbits. This is like the Did You Know section of the Tesla Roadster podcast.
Looking forward to this. I've seen through some of this stuff.
Did you know that Tesla Motors was founded in 2003 by Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning? I would say that anybody in the Roadster world that doesn't know that probably hasn't been doing their homework.
Yes,
that's a given.
And a good point to find with that. It was not founded by Elon Musk.
Right.
He was not in the picture when Martin and Mark founded the company.
And it was not founded by Nikola Tesla, although the name honors that inventor. Elon Musk became the largest shareholder after investing $6.5 million in 2004. Elon has also been CEO since 2008. And the Tesla Roadster was the Tesla's first electric car, which started production in 2008. The Tesla Model S was released. Anybody want to guess here?
2012?
Exactly, yes.
Yes.
Yep. And I remember the first Tesla event that I organized at Cars and Coffee here in Scottsdale at Gainey Ranch. It was usually exotics, Lamborghini, Ferrari, McLaren, all of that, was the Tesla Roadsters. And I've got an image showing about 30 or 35 or so Tesla Roadsters all lined up. And there was one Model S. And this was in 2013, I think, close to 2014. And it was one of the first Tesla Model S's in the state of Arizona, belonged to Ralph Lauer's wife.
Okay.
So, that was the year. 2012 is when it was released. In 2013, Elon Musk almost sold Tesla to what company, guys? Did you know?
BYD.
They weren't around yet. Remember you were just saying that. Nice guess, though. No, it was actually Google. And, Elon's friends with some of the original founders of Google, Sergey Brin, and in fact, one of them bought a Roadster, maybe a couple of them.
Yeah, and if I remember right, the price was going to be fairly high, a few $1 billion. I'm less certain about that. I'm more certain about the sale fell through when Elon saw the potential of the Model S, and they got basically a large set of orders in. They saw sales numbers increasing rapidly, and Elon said, "You know what? Nope, I'm not going to do this. I believe this is going to take off. We're not going to." They got an infusion of cash, basically.
Wise decision. Wise decision. All right. So when did Autopilot first come out for Tesla? This is the driver assistance system.
I did not know that one. I thought it was 2015.
2014 is what they say. When was Model X first released?
2010?
2015, a year later. The X came after the Model S. The Model 3 was released mid-2017, and it became the highest rated Tesla car. I can remember when the Tesla Model S made Car and Driver's list as the best car ever. All the judges unanimously agreed, and that apparently had never happened.
Yeah, and I remember as the Model 3 was getting ready to be released, how many Tesla owners were upset that Tesla was going to cheapen the brand by having a lower cost car.
Right, I remember that, yeah. And they thought it would never go anywhere because, people were used to luxury cars. And
yes, because Tesla was a luxury car maker. How dare they make a car for the masses?
Amin Sobat says, BYD, ha ha ha. Okay. By the way, we're going to have a bio video on the chairman of BYD. And BYD stands for what, guys? You just said it in half hour
I
ago.
did. Yeah,
Well,
1 second. I just got to pull
Something,
up the screen. Build your dreams.
Build your dreams.
Build your dreams. Yes, okay. We're going to have a video released on the chairman of BYD, whose name is Wang Chuanfu. And again, like most bios, you get a glimpse into their history. What was their early life like? And it's quite a fascinating story. It comes from poverty and quite a trajectory. Good business decisions all along the way. And let's not forget the fact that they have become the #1 EV manufacturer in the world as of Q4 of last year.
That's right.
Tesla was, thought to be never be unseated from that lofty category.
Yeah. And BYD's growth trajectory is just incredible.
Yeah. All right, the Tesla Semi. What year did that come out? 2019. The Tesla Model Y crossover was launched when?
I thought it was before the Semi, but according to the list here, I'm cheating because I see the list. It was 2020.
Yep. And then how many employees does Tesla have? I've got a graph here that I'm going to read from for you. In 2010, they had 899 employees. Now, remember, the Tesla Roadster was already out by then for 2 years. So under 1,000 employees. Then they, 2011, they went up to 1,400, 2,900, 5,000 by 2013. But it still didn't get spectacular until 2017 when they jumped from 17,000 to 37,000. And that would have been the Model 3 ramp up.
That would have been the Model 3 ramp up, yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, incremental growth again. And currently, Tesla has 140,000 employees worldwide.
Yeah, 140,473 as of December 31st of 2023.
Yep, there we go. All right, so here's some other did you knows. The Model S achieved 0 to 60 in less than 2 seconds with, of course, the Plaid version.
That's right. We were talking about that in our last podcast at 1.99 seconds.
Right. And then who unseated them?
Lucid Sapphire unseated them with
yes.
a 1.89 second 0 to 60. And then right after that, the Rimac Nevera, which is a supercar. It's a $2.2 million car and a 1.74 second 0 to 60.
And before the Plaid came out, Tesla was pretty excited about Roadster number 2 in that it achieved a 2-second 0 to 60. And then the Plaid actually beat that.
Yes, and people did not believe that the Roadster could. They said, until we see the video, we believe it's fake because we believe that the tires would simply shred.
Yep.
You cannot put a stock tire onto a car that has a 2-second or less time. They're not made to do that. They will simply shred.
Yep. Now here's another did you know. This one's going to be pretty obvious to some, but the models, Tesla models S3, X, and Y are designed to spell sexy. Do you know why they use 3 instead of an E?
I do not.
Ford claimed a copyright on the Model E and squashed that. It was going to be Model E.
I did not know that.
So Elon, thinking out of the box again, or being dyslexic, decided on 3. It worked, right?
It worked. It was the third model that they produced, so Model 3 made a lot of sense, and it keeps the acronym in place.
Another did you know, what is Tesla trading under on the NASDAQ? What What symbol?
Well, on the NASDAQ, it's TSLA.
Right. Okay. Cybertruck, Tesla's electric pickup trucks started reaching customers in what year?
This last year, in fact,
2024.
I think we were on with the release and delivery of the first 12 of those the first part of November.
Right. All right. Tesla Q4 deliveries in 2023 is 484,000 cars. And I've got a graph here that I would have thrown up, but I don't have it handy here. You can see it's just a steep incline
Yes.
trajectory.
By the way, I have to say that Tesla has different features for their cars, their cooling features, and that's dog mode, camp mode,
Right.
on, and trip planner. And my wife, I think she was joking, but I'm not totally sure. She said, "Don't you ever leave it on in dog mode while I'm here in the car waiting for you."
My wife's Tesla has the fart sound. And my 14-month-old granddaughter was sitting in the back Sunday as we were going to eat. And I turned it on just, to get my wife laughing. And my granddaughter actually laughed as well. So at 14 months, they know what that is.
Oh, that's too funny.
All right. I guess we've had a good show. Is there anything else you guys want us to cover?
I think we've had a great show here. And good information on the Chinese Roadsters again. A good way to kind of wrap that up now that we had this extra information that has been disclosed elsewhere and we're finally allowed to disclose.
Yes.
So congratulations again to Dan O'Dowd, the buyer of the 3 Chinese Roadsters.
And thank you for joining us. As always, we'll see you next week.
Take care.